Hi, I'm Emily. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I'm filming a autumn reading list, or fall, depending on where you are. And I am so excited for this video. I'm also at the end going to include my reading list for the upcoming season. I've got my puppy, Chi-Chi, and she loves sitting with me while I read, so she's gonna join me. And let's get started. Let's start with my most recent read. This would be the perfect book to read this autumn. So it's kind of cozy, it's very introspective, and I think that's perfect for this season and time of year. So it's The Third Love by Hiromi Kawakami. It came out, I'm pretty sure, just a couple months ago. Granta published it, and it's a really interesting book. It's had very mixed reviews, but for me it was probably one of my favorite reads of the year. I was having a bit of a reading slump, so I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and it brought me out of the slump because it was just fun. It was a really fun read. I went from that onto this. This is definitely in my top books of the year. Basically, the main character, Riko, is married and she's dealing with difficulties in her marriage that lead her to explore her dream landscape and dream world. We read a story that moves between three different kind of narrative lines, including Riko's life in today. Then we have her go back a few centuries to the Edo period, and then we have her go back again to another time to the 17th century where she plays like a handmaiden to a princess in the Heian times. What's really interesting about this is, so she lives these dream lives as well as her real life, but they all blend together, so it's not that the dream lives feel any less real than her life set in like current times. We see a lot of comparisons drawn between different time periods in Japan, and we also see Riko dissect what marriage means and dissect relationships between men and women. All these ideas are applied from older time periods to the current time period. So for me it was just a really thought-provoking read, had me highlighting quite a bit, and I just also really enjoyed the prose. It's hard to explain what this book is, so it seems like it would be confusing shifting between all these time periods. For me it flows really well, and I know that some people didn't feel that way, and a lot of the kind of criticism around this book is the relationships, and I definitely found the relationships questionable. But I think that was the purpose of this novel. I think it was really dissecting some extremes within male and female relationships and the complex themes and questions. So definitely recommend this. So Rachel Cusk outline. This book is more of a summer read. However, I feel like coming out of summer and into autumn, you may still feel like having a little bit of that lingering in your life. So I feel like this is a good book to include in this list. It's also, for me, another book that's extremely introspective, and it's told from the viewpoint of this protagonist, but the feeling of it is very reflective and introspective again, and it really makes you sit still while you're reading it, like in your mind as well, because it's not a plot heavy novel. It doesn't really rely on like huge action or anything to guide us through a story. What it is really is a character study, and the protagonist, it's not even really about what's happening to her and what she's doing. It's the people she's meeting and the people she's coming across while she's teaching a course in creative writing over a summer in Athens. And we come to uncover a lot of her life through the reflections of others that she's meeting and through what we can like glimpse, because we don't follow her much aside from in her interactions with other people. So it's super interesting. It's almost play-like because it very much relies on dialogue and interaction amongst different characters, yet it's still really a deep dive into this character's psyche. What is genius about this book is the way that I think that it's like crafted very experimentally and in a really interesting way to kind of push boundaries and show what's possible in a novel. I read it a little while ago, but I was looking through my books and I saw that there's a trilogy of these books, and I would really like to read the other two. Okay, so it wouldn't be autumn for me without a Jane Austen read, and I've pretty much gone through all her books, but I often revisit her works, especially Emma. But this time I'm going to recommend Sense and Sensibility, which is one of my other favorites of her novels. I mean, I'm a big Jane Austen fan, so it's hard to pick favorites, but definitely Sense and Sensibility is up there because it's about relationships between sisters, and I really enjoy that. So basically they're brought out into polite society and they are navigating a lot of like relational difficulties and issues and everything. One sister's more opinionated, outspoken, and the other one's more reserved. They have to kind of learn from each other throughout this year to like navigate the society that they've entered into. It's a really interesting glimpse at 19th century society, as all her novels are. I find her writing so comforting and cozy. I've been reading her for so long, but also her focus on young women navigating their society and like this coming of age kind of moment in their lives is always interesting to me, so I really enjoy that. And I always think reading like a longer book in autumn is so fun because you've got like longer evenings where it's darker earlier and you can just sit and read, and I love reading classics. I just finished reading this in the summer, Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn, Waugh, and very interesting book to read, especially after the whole Saltburn fascination of last year. If you take Talented Mr. Ripley, Saltburn and Brideshead Revisited, there's something very similar amongst these three stories. So it was interesting to kind of go back here and read a really early kind of dark academia novel, and it's interesting when you read these stories about complex characters who aren't necessarily likable and who are finding themselves in this world of academics and how that society shapes them and the kind of choices they make that often are quite questionable. I definitely like the earlier half of the novel more than the later half. It follows Charles Ryder, and he goes to Oxford and he meets Sebastian at Oxford and becomes like fascinated by him and his family, and so he gets taken like into their world and he becomes close with his sister and his mother and different characters throughout the book. And so it's very Saltburn-esque to begin with. Especially Charles is a painter or an aspiring artist, so you see him kind of grapple with that versus his studies and everything. I would say like so many characters in this book are really unlikable. So when the story begins, the Second World War is happening and Charles is in the army. Then you go back in time, so you like flash back, and for the most part the whole novel is a flashback, beginning with Charles going to Oxford. And so it's interesting because you know that the world that he's creating while he's in Oxford is gonna kind of crumble at some point. You're questioning a lot from the moment you begin this novel. Evelyn Waugh wrote this very sumptuously and very rich settings and food and parties and all of those kind of things. He wrote it during the war, and it was at a time where he was nostalgic and really missing all those things that they had before. He wrote this in the 1940s, but I think it's set in the 20s. Very interesting novel. Each character really is quite well developed and stirs a lot within the novel, and if you're a Saltburn fan, you will definitely like this. Let me know what kind of books you've been reading, what books are on your to-be-read list for the autumn period, and do you have any recommendations? Have you read any of these books? What's your thoughts? I'd love to know, so let me know in the comments. I'm currently working on my dissertation still. I've got many months to continue with this project, so I've been reading a lot for that as well. I'm writing a screenplay, so I've been reading a lot of screenplays and a lot of books about writing and watching a lot of movies. I've been also reading novels, but I want to get more back into my novel reading. Audre Lorde, Your Silence Will Not Protect You. This is an essay collection and a brilliant one. Audre Lorde is one of, I think, the best essayists that I've ever read. She is just so poignant, articulate, and her writing has this really grounded depth to it that is hard to achieve. I haven't read the entire collection yet, but I've been reading it like steadily over time, and the whole book is called Your Silence Will Not Protect You, which is based on one of her essays. The first essay that opens this up is The Transformation of Silence, and the first sentence of that is, I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. And she talks about the importance of language and the importance of using your voice. It's hard to even put into words everything that she distills in this book. And in her each essay is as poignant as the next, which isn't often the case in collections. She talks about poetry not being a luxury and how your silence won't protect you and how it's really important to have a voice. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. And she talks about how there's a reserve of creativity and power that resides within a woman, and that needs to be tapped into and looked after and spoken and brought out rather than kept hidden. I look at this book and there's so much I would just read out right now, like things that I constantly think about. Her writing really makes you think very deeply. They just talk about her extraordinary belief in the power of language, of speaking to articulate selfhood, confront injustice, and bring about change in the world. It remains as transformative today as it was then, and no less urgent. I'm a big non-fiction reader and essay reader, and highly recommend this. It's a really deep read and it's going to take a long time. Like, it's not a read you want to breeze through, it's a read you want to sit with and delve into and read slowly so that you can really take in all the meaning of her words, because you really feel that every word is so powerful in this book. Highly recommend this. The next book is Jhumpa Lahiri, In Other Words. I don't know if I've recommended this one before. I think I may have recommended Whereabouts. I'm a big Jhumpa Lahiri fan. Again, I think the theme here is introspective and like books that make you want to think and that you want to take in really slowly. I found her writing to be it distills things that often you think about when you're moving countries or living in different places in a way that is hard to articulate. And she does a really great job at speaking to those feelings that are sometimes hard to put into words. Jhumpa Lahiri wrote this in Italian. She decided to move to Italy with her family because she was learning Italian and she wanted to speak the language, she wanted to immerse herself in it. This book dissects her relationship with Italian, the language, and with language in general, and with writing and telling stories, and with home, and all these interesting ideas that really do affect so many of us. Is that Jhumpa Lahiri wrote it in Italian, and so on the one page on this side it's Italian and on the other side it's English in translation. So I don't read Italian, but I can read it in English and see her original writing on the other side. I love reading translated works, and when they have the two languages next to each other I always find that really fascinating. Even if I don't understand the original language it's written in, I just like seeing the exchange between the both. She just talks about how she started diaries to try and learn Italian, and she would write to herself in Italian there, and then it wasn't enough to just write in the diary, she needed to start telling stories. And she says, I think that a writer should observe the real world before imagining a non-existent one. And there's so much in here that is about writing and about a writer's life paired with what it is to move countries and to live in different places and to learn a new language and to, you know, find yourself and find your own identity when so much has shifted around you. That's really interesting to me as well. Having moved and lived in different countries, it's like a feeling that's really hard to grasp and put into words. It's a feeling that's really experienced by so many people, but I don't see it in that many novels or even movies. They write here, this book investigates the process of learning to express oneself in another language and describes the journey of a writer seeking a new voice. This is a wholly original book about exile, linguistic and otherwise, written with an intensity and clarity, a startling act of self-reflection and a provocative exploration of belonging and reinvention. And it really does that, so I highly recommend this. I think this was actually the first Jhumpa Lahiri I ever read, but I think it's a great read, especially if you're moving this autumn, if you're going to a new school or a new university, if you're going somewhere new. Last book recommendation, and it is Madonna in a Fur Coat. Actually, one of you guys recommended me this book in one of my book videos in a comment, and thank you so much if you're watching this, because I really loved reading this. I'm always on the lookout for translated novels and novels from different time periods, different countries that I haven't read before, and so this one is a Turkish novel by Sabahattin, who was a Turkish author, and it's a romance. However, there's this like real depth to it that for me feels beyond romance. When I read about it, it didn't really depict what it felt like once I actually read the novel. They say on the back, a tale of young love and disenchantment, of missed opportunities and passion's elusive flickering flame. The magical novel about a Turkish man who falls in love with an artist in 1920s Berlin, recreates a vanished era and dramatizes a doomed relationship with verve, depth and poignancy. The result is a miniature masterpiece. So when it begins, Rafe is an old man, but at some point, a little bit into the novel, it flips and we're reading about Rafe as a young man. We're reading his life in the 1920s, where he has left Turkey and gone to Berlin, and he wants to become a painter, and he finds this portrait of a woman, and it's a self-portrait, and he ends up meeting the woman who is the artist. And that begins, you know, what the center of this novel is, which is their relationship. And their relationship is far more complex than typical romance novels. It's very melancholic. It feels very poetic. It leaves you with a lot of feelings. There are times where I really wanted things to be different and turn out differently. It's not a very long book, but it took me actually quite a long time to read. Once we got into Rafe's life in Berlin, I preferred the earlier part of that whole time. What's really interesting about this novel is it talks about these dynamics between people in a way that is really understanding of the complexities and not trying to simplify anything, and really just trying to dig into what those complexities are and what they feel like, but not try to explain anything. So it feels very evocative, and I don't feel that too many novels do that now. Actually, so many of the ones that I've chosen though, like The Third Love and this, do give you that sense of delving deeper into like human psyche and how humans relate and connect with each other in a way that feels really specific to each different author and novel, yet also universal to just dynamics amongst people and things that you can relate to. That's all for the books that I'm going to recommend, but now I'm just going to talk about a few of the books that I want to read this autumn. This book I've been wanting to read for years and years, and I've started it and I'm just a little bit of the way through, like about 50 pages. The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. I've read the beginning of it. I really enjoy her prose style, and this is the first one I want to read, and then I want to watch the Winona Ryder movie. So basically I've just begun and I've just seen that like there's a couple that are engaged, and I think that things are going to get a bit complicated as this goes on. Really like the prose style. I sink into this novel quite quickly. It's definitely on my list, and it's one of those cozy books that I just want to read. And then another book I absolutely can't believe I haven't read is The Hobbit. I think I've read parts of it. I've just never read the whole novel. Growing up, I remember having like a copy of this. My sister's read it and loved it, but it's my mum's favorite novel. Like growing up, it was her favorite novel. So I can't believe I haven't read it, because her book recommendations are always the best. So yeah, everybody knows Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so I don't need to describe this one. It's like a dense book and a slow moving book, so it's one of those ones you really want to have time to just kind of, again, sit down and read. I've seen the movies and I've seen Lord of the Rings, and so I do feel like this story is very familiar, but I haven't read it fully through. I think I've read about half. So I'm gonna go back and read that whole book. Elena Ferrante, I love in the margins her non-fiction work about writing, but I haven't actually read any of her like full novels before. I've read parts, and so I really want to begin with My Brilliant Friend. I've started this. I have a bad habit of starting novels and then letting them pile up next to my bed and not knowing which one to get into first, so I need to work on that, but definitely hoping to finish all those ones that I've started now. And My Brilliant Friend, I know it was also adapted into a TV show, which I want to watch as well, but it follows two friends, Lanu and Lila. I know that this is a series, but this first book I think takes place in their childhood more, and maybe their adolescence, because it is separated into prologue, childhood and adolescence. I love a good coming of age story, so I'm really like always wanted to read this. It feels very much up my alley. And I really like how Elena talks about writing, and I like her writing, her non-fiction, so I'm sure I'm gonna enjoy this. And so far what I've read has been interesting. I'm really curious to see where that's going to go. I need to read this, and once I do I will let you know what I think. But let me know in the comments what you've read of Elena Ferrante, if you've read any of her works, because I have my eye on some of their novels as well. I'm not sure which ones to get to next. So I have Intimacies by Katie Kitamura, and I have been interested in Katie Kitamura's writing. It was one of the New York Times 10 best books of the year and was on the long list for the National Book Award. They say it blends the personal and the political in spare, elegant, inimitable prose, standout novel like nothing I've read before. And if that's the case, I'm really excited. It's about a woman who's seen something and she has to confront power, love and violence. And Alexandra Kleeman, who is one of my favorites, she was one of the people who wrote in here. It's saturated with enigmatic longing, intimacies, peels back the layers of sympathy, antipathy and morality that both connect and divide us from others, unearthing something precious beneath. Katie Kitamura is a revelatory interpreter of the human heart in all its brilliance and obscurity. Another recommendation, Alexandra Kleeman. Like, she's just amazing. Her book, You Too Can Have a Body Like Mine, is really complex and just very original, if you are interested in that. Okay. So, my other book that I really want to read, and that I've also just started, is Abigail by Magda. I've had this on my list for a little while. I think actually one of you recommended this author, and this is a novel from Hungary, and Magda is a very popular Hungarian author. I have been wanting to read her for a really long time, but I'm particularly curious about this book. Yeah, the main character, Gina, goes from Budapest to the countryside to like a really rural school. but she goes from having this like very different life in the city to being at boarding school in an all-girls school, and just the way that's depicted is really striking and very, very real. I'm very taken by this book already and can relate to parts of it so much, from having like gone from one school to another in different countries and experiencing like this real shift in how everything feels so different that it can be quite shocking. So I think that was really well depicted so far in this book, and obviously to like another extreme because she's in this militant boarding school, but the way her emotional life is written is very, very raw and potent, and I really respect that because it's not easy to achieve that in prose. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think of any of these books that you've read as well, so please let me know in the comments. And if you have any good recommendations, please share them as well. So many of you have recommended brilliant books for me that I'm like loving so much. But now I have to go because I'm off to a dance class with my sister and I have to go get ready for that. And also let me know in the comments if there's anything you particularly want to see book content wise from me. I was thinking of doing like a book club where we could read, like talk about one specific book in a video, maybe every month or something, so that might be fun. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, and yeah, thank you so much for watching.